What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Marcus, and here today in front of me is the 2022 Volvo C40 Recharge twin motor Ultimate. All-wheel drive, fully spec'd, 400 horsepower. Let's go for a drive.
I just wish you knew.
So the C40 Recharge is only available in all-wheel drive. It's powered by two electric motors, one for the front wheels, of course, and one for the rear wheels. Now that's in contrast to something, let's say the Mustang Mach-E, which we'll get to a little bit later, which is offered at a slightly lower price point, but in rear-wheel drive. So here we have the all-wheel drive practicality and usability, especially out here in Canada. 402 horsepower, 486 pound-feet of torque. That's ridiculous. It's so crazy to me that in 10 years we've gone from ordinary vehicles to an ordinary vehicle, but under the skin lurks 486 pound-feet of torque, which we'll demonstrate right now. Really starts pulling about 50 kilometers an hour, and we're well past 60 miles an hour. So it is great. Regardless of which trim you go with, you do get all of that power. So we have an EPA range of 364 kilometers here, which is about 226 miles, which is very good for the segment. Of course, like I mentioned, there's only one battery option here. Starting price here in Canada is 59,000 Canadian. This one, as spec'd with a bunch of options for the Ultimate package, is $72,600 Canadian. No suspension settings here, so the car is very simple. If you've watched my Volvo videos in the past, you know it's kind of very simplistic. They take a lot of things that you may have to be forced to think about, or a setting you may want to choose when you get into the vehicle. They just take basically all of that away. The only settings you really get in terms of driving dynamics are your one pedal drive option. So if I hit that, I haven't done anything. Both of my feet are off the pedals and the car will come to a complete stop without my input, which well, to give it credit, it comes to an incredibly smooth stop. Definitely smoother than any human that I know that can bring a vehicle to a stop on their own. But it does have great one pedal driving. It's not really my thing, although when I drove the Lucid Air, I got very accustomed to it. And then of course you have your steering assist, which you can go from ordinary or steering feel firm. The good thing about the steering feel that I've noticed is when you put it in the firm setting in very low speed conditions, it lightens up a lot. Like around parking lots, it still goes back to like a super light setting, which I really love. And then above, let's say about 10 to 15 kilometers an hour, it goes into its firm setting for real. As you guys noticed, to turn on that one pedal drive, which is effectively your regen braking setting, the one and only regen braking setting here, you do have to do one press, two press, scroll down, and four press. 4 touches of the screen there. I guess 3 presses to turn off your one pedal drive. I really wish they would have added, I don't know, maybe just a second button down here. Steering's good here. The steering rack is really tight on center. It loses a little bit of feel when you get into the corners. Of course, masking about 4,800 pounds here. The uphill battle with all EVs, but you know, the ratio of the rack is good and it's very tight, very direct. It just, don't come here expecting phenomenal steering feel. We do have adaptive cruise control here. Of course, it will keep us in our lane. Oh, maybe not on this road, actually. In my experience, when there's 2 solid lines, it will take, oh, there we go. Now it'll take the steering wheel from me. And it will drive. Simple interior, good visibility. Out the front, yeah. But XC40 compared to the C40 here, to put it in perspective, the rear headroom, not the rear headroom, the rear visibility, I cannot see the horizon when I look in my rear view. I can see a vehicle that's within a reasonable distance of the rear of the car, but I can't see much further than that because the rear slope is so aggressive. Understeer push there for sure. I mean, the torque is ridiculous, you guys. This is more than you'll ever need. 0 to 60 miles an hour is dealt with here in 4.3 seconds. Not a slow vehicle, just a few tenths of a second off of, let's say, a brand new base M3, which is ridiculous. Okay, so the C40 from the exterior, maybe you disagree, but I think this is a great looking vehicle. It's phenomenal. I love the sloped back look. Maybe it's not your thing, but of course, the stiffest competition here is Volvo's own XC40, which is very similar, just without the sloped back. It's kind of like the X5, X6 comparison here, except with a full-size SUV and not a crossover. Now, upon first impressions, the C40 doesn't necessarily look like it's built for off-road, and I don't really believe necessarily, even though it is all-wheel drive, that that's Volvo's first target demographic for this vehicle. Although you'll notice it does have really great ground clearance, and of course the plastic black cladding on the bottom here and along the fenders would suggest that you can get it a little bit dirty and you don't have to be as afraid of rock chips on the paint. Of course, with the Ultimate Edition, the top spec model, you get these 5-spoke diamond cut wheels, 20-inch, so that kind of contradicts the ride height and the off-road capabilities, and we'll get to how that affects the suspension and the ride, but it looks great. I love the slope back look. It's kind of blurring the lines between Polestar and Volvo, which I love. No idea if these are actually providing any sort of aerodynamic benefit to the wing, or if it's been in a wind tunnel. My guess is no, but nonetheless, I really don't care. I think it looks phenomenal. And one of my favorite things are the taillights. You can follow the light as it starts up. Just a cool touch. A lot of great design going on at Volvo I've found in the last few years. But of course, one of the biggest changes, because when you're buying a vehicle like this with extra seats, and not just a sports car, you want to fit people in the back. The biggest point, and the only comparison I'll really make between the XC40 and this, is you do lose 4 centimeters of rear headroom back here. As you can see, the tops of the headrests are a couple centimeters from the roof. I do love this headliner, by the way, too, how it's not just standard Alcantara. But you do lose that, and of course, when we come around to the back, and you do lose a little bit of cargo space here as well. So that's worthy to note. Come around to the front. What we can do is open up the front of the vehicle here. So if you guys watched my i4 video review, you would have noticed that car, of course, because it's based off the gas-powered 4 Series, they didn't seem to have time to like put in storage into the front. Whereas here in the C40, it looks, other than the grille here, or the lack thereof, I should say, it looks like a standard gas-powered Volvo, which I love. The wheels set it apart. It still has a lot of the design cues, fog lights here on this model, from the other Volvos, but it's not in-your-face EV, which I love, but they're ahead of the game because there is a little bit of storage here. Look at this though. Made in France. That's blasphemy. No wonder they hid that under here. I hope this is the only piece. On the interior, there's Swedish flags everywhere, so that's a little bit funny. Here they also include a tire sealant kit and an air compressor for you there. There's some storage. Easy to use. Volvo also says this is their first vehicle that has been made with 0 leather. Can you tell? Jokes aside, I do love the steering wheel. It's a little bit firm, it's a little bit hard. There's virtually no padding underneath here at all, but Great steering wheel other than that. The interior here, this is a synthetic material here. It's almost as if it was made from an activewear material, from a jacket or something like that. Apparently it's very easy to clean. That's what Volvo says. And then of course this is suede here. One of the only pieces in the interior which is suede or Alcantara, which is great because of course, as we know, over time Alcantara gets gross. And then we do have the matching blue carpet on the interior to match the exterior. So a very simple, clean and simplistic two-tone interior, which I love. And then of course, as you saw in the intro, once we get in here, there's no start button. So I hit drive and we're off, right? And if I stop in drive, open the door, it will set the parking brake and I'm able to get out and turn off the car. There, it just turned off for me. You can see a topographical insert here and on the doors. We have soft touch plastic on the dash here, and then of course on the top spec, Harman Kardon stereo system. We've got touchscreen here. This is all ran by Google. Actually, I'll go back to the range assistant screen here. Now we're down to 260, and then of course you can optimize range by limiting the climate control. So you can turn that on and then save as much electricity as possible. It's pretty intuitive. It's good to use in most scenarios. It's not perfect. I'm really glad, on the other hand, that it isn't a touchpad down here. A lot of manufacturers have gotten rid of that, which I'm so happy about. But even still, with this minimalist kind of interior here, we still do have physical volume knob and then your defrost and next tracks down here. But you do only have your temperature and then of course your heated steering wheel and seats down here. But other than that, you have to hit this for the rest of the climate controls, which isn't a big deal. It's still very intuitive and easy to use and stuff, but that is definitely worthy to note. Google Maps is standard here, which is phenomenal. So you don't actually have to hook up your phone just to get Google Maps, and that will, of course, bring you to your closest charging stations. Very simple gauge cluster here, like the other Volvos I reviewed last year. The only modification you can do here, in stark contrast to, let's say, Mercedes or BMW, which I would argue almost has too much customizability within the menus, it's a bit overwhelming. Here in the mature Volvo C40, okay, we do only have one option, and that is to either display maps in the middle here or not display maps. So it is great. You aren't able to change the zoom on this map here. Of course you can on the main display, but that's it. They give you that, they give you your battery percentage, and then of course they give you your charging efficiency. I guess I don't really pay attention to most of those things most of the time because in a vehicle like this, I do a lot of both. I'll do a lot of efficient driving, but I'll also kind of just have fun and mat it here and there. So that's that. Other than that, the interior is great, very simplistic, and enough storage and compartments to lose things, I would think. The seats are definitely on the firm side. You do sit high up, but I found I am absolutely able to lower the seat enough to still kind of have that hunkered down driving experience. But range here, we'll go into range assistant. Driving style, yeah, we're 3/4 to nutcase jail behind bars. That's what the max should be there. To put it in perspective, let's pair it up against, real quick, just the Mustang Mach-E. Another great looking EV in my opinion. But when you go for a base Mach-E, like I mentioned earlier, you are able to spec rear wheel drive. When you spec all wheel drive with the standard, not long range battery, the price of this versus that is within 100 Canadian dollars. They're right at $60,000 Canadian. Yet, for that money, you get substantially less power with the Mach-E than you do here. You get a lot more power here, and the charging rates, the max charging rates for those two vehicles are the same. So here it's 150 kilowatts on a DC fast charger. It'll do 10 to 80% in 40 minutes. The Mach-E claims to do 10 to 80% in 45 minutes. So they're very much on par versus the GV60, which has a much faster charge rate, and a few of the other EVs in the segment. So that is worthy to note, I think, for you guys. And while we're on the topic of competition, this is the Genesis GV60. And of course, the C40's biggest competition is this, the Genesis GV60. A new EV that's basically been taking the internet by storm with simple gimmicks like this, your gear selector that is almost like a crystal ball that reveals itself in such a way where your passengers might let out an audible ooh or ah. We live in the future, and that's exactly what Genesis is hoping for here. Even the start-stop button, it just can't be a start-stop button, you guys. It's an EV start-stop button. This one's a little bit more shouty. We'll go for a quick drive. Right off the bat, let me get this very clear. These are polar opposite vehicles. The C40 looks like a standard Volvo, whereas this Genesis GV60, not 2 minutes ago, I just had some guy in an F-150 come up to the vehicle and was like, what is that? And I'm like, it's a Genesis GV60. It's like, please explain this to me in layman's terms. Is it Toyota, Honda? He didn't even know what Genesis was. So that's the difference here. Volvo, everybody knows Volvo. Genesis is a mystery to a lot of people. Now, the way this looks in styling, I'm not quite sold on it. I haven't quite come around to the rear end. They do have those distinct, which is now kind of like a brand identity piece, I guess you could say, with the rear taillights and the headlights, for that matter, that are kind of split top and bottom. Now, in terms of the class of vehicles, you might look at these two side by side, and very clearly the C40 has way more ground clearance than this car, and they're both called crossovers, whereas here there's a lot less ground clearance. To me, this is a hatchback. This is a slightly lifted hatchback. The reason why I brought it into this video is because, of course, the Volvo C40 starts at $60,000 Canadian, and same goes for the GV60, the exact same base MSRP. Now, the biggest difference here is with the base GV60, you get a lot less horsepower. 314 horsepower, 446 pound-feet of torque for $60,000. Now, for $10,000 more, you are able to spec a performance version, but the performance version has quite a bit more horsepower, but you're paying for it. It is not cheap. Yeah, the torque here is great. There's no comparison. I mean, the base model's absolutely a little bit slower than the C40, but not by much. Here in the GV60, there are so many physical buttons. They've kind of just everything all at once, just more. We're not sure. It almost seems like they're not sure who's gonna buy this, which is something you do get with a brand like Genesis, with a manufacturer who's just getting their leg up in the luxury space. So down here, we do have HVAC controls that are effectively, I mean, they're always in the same place. So while the center here, your fan speed and your AC and your heat and where the air is going is all digital, on the left and right, you do have physical buttons as well. Down below, you've got all these buttons to get you directly to the nav, to the radio, but you also are able to go up to the screen and just hit media or phone or radio or nav or anything like that. It doesn't stop there, because down here you also have a scroll wheel to control the screen. And all of the materials here are, I mean, there is leather in this in contrast to the Volvo, and a lot of Alcantara as well. The headliner's Alcantara. I will mention, when we're on the subject of ergonomics real quick, on the left side on the door here, what is this? The adjustment for the mirror controls is gigantic. It is huge. It looks like a focal point. It's huge, it's a focal point, and it has no reason to be that big and prominent. How often are you adjusting your mirrors? But here on the steering wheel itself, you've got your drive modes, Eco, Comfort, and Sport, which we'll get to in a second. Then you have a boost function, which for 10 seconds, oh, it's boosting? Are you really, Hyundai? A Genesis, sorry, I misspoke. Are you really, Genesis? Definitely a little bit more floaty here, which I was not expecting. Wow, comfort mode versus eco makes the throttle a lot more sensitive. And when you put it in sport, the throttle pedal becomes almost uncomfortably sensitive. And a few more spaceship-like noises here in the GV60, which is to be expected. We also get a heads-up display here, which cannot be optioned with the C40. One of the cool quirks about this car is that it will come out of a parking space just with the key fob alone. It'll reverse out of the parking space and come to meet you, which kind of makes me a little bit nervous. If you forget your key, another cool feature of this car is when you walk up to the side here, you'll notice there's a face recognition camera here. So you do just have to take into consideration, do you want the flashy gauge cluster that changes when you go Eco, Comfort, Sport? Do you want people coming up to you? All of these kinds of things. And just more options, more buttons to press, more things to look at, and more things to cure your algorithm addiction and your boredom when it inevitably comes up. So anyways, this was the C40 Recharge twin motor, all-wheel drive, Ultimate Edition, top spec here in Canada. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. You can hit me up on Instagram if you want to see what I'm driving on a day-to-day basis. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I've got a lot of cool stuff coming up. I'm hopefully going to be driving some really interesting stuff even throughout the winter. So yeah, we'll see you guys very soon.